Hi everybody, Sherry Moore here. Today I'd like to talk to you about why I write sci-fi. And get interesting reactions from people when I tell them I'm a sci-fi writer. Usually people are very interested when you tell them you're a writer, and the first question is, what do you write? When I say sci-fi, I always get some curious looks and some surprised reactions. Oh, sci-fi, you write sci-fi. And I find it interesting. I guess because of stereotypes, most people think that they're going to hear a woman say they write romance or they write mysteries. And I did start out as a mystery writer, and I very much enjoyed it. I wrote paranormal mysteries, on the Tanger Falls mystery being the last one that I wrote, and I still occasionally dabble in them. My most recent was Duality, a Thanksgiving mystery that I'll talk about as we get into November. That was a pet project of mine that I really enjoyed doing. But today I want to talk about sci-fi and why that. I think it's kind of funny when people act surprised that I write sci-fi because the genre was actually started by a woman. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was the first sci-fi book that was written in a competition with her husband and several of his friends, which kind of launched that genre. So while it is male dominated, I don't think many people know it was actually started by a woman. And we can do it too, women like science and technology too. I certainly do. I've always grown up with an interest in that area. And I think that I drifted from mystery to science fiction not only because that's what I like to read myself, but because it just kind of fits my personality and my storytelling style. Sci-fi is vast. There's bigger stories, bigger stakes. There's just more room. There's so much to discover out there. We're still discovering things. Space is vast. The what ifs that inspire fiction have a lot of room to grow. The theoretical science, especially as you can tell from my books, I really am into quantum physics and string theory, multiverse theory. It's fertile ground for those what ifs. If we were a bit more advanced, what could we do to solve our problems? How would we handle things? How would we handle situations differently if man and machine were integrated more? If we had AI to a higher level to assist us, what would we do? How would we use it? How would it impact us and the world around us? What if we could develop off-world and live in space? There you've got settings that there's a lot of sci-fi written that takes place in outer space. It's really fun to kind of develop new worlds without having to do it from scratch like you do in fantasy. Fantasy has always intimidated me a little bit because of the world building. With sci-fi, you've already got the world there. You're just building it from where we are right now. And I think that's another thing that I like about sci-fi is it explores the rewards and consequences of life right now. You can project into that space in the future with all of those theories to step out of what is and build what can be and say, how would now impact, say, I like near future sci-fi, so 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 300 years from now. It really is interesting to just take yourself out of where you are and put it beyond what you're going to know. Yeah, I know I'm not going to be alive in another 100 years, but it's fun to imagine what the world might look like then, and it really is a lot of ground and space to grow. There's, like I said, bigger space, bigger stakes. That's how I like to put it. You can really develop these multi-layered complex stories like I like to tell. And it's just a lot of fun to do. It's a lot of fun to explore, and it makes us smarter. I love to learn, and science and technology especially, key areas of interest for me. You actually learn things. You learn a lot. Keeping up with the news and makes you smarter, kind of helps you step out of yourself, broaden your horizons. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating because so much is theoretical research. You can imagine, how would this apply? What would happen if we proved it? How might we prove it? What would we do with it? It's a big space, and I'm not knocking other genres and saying they're too narrow. In fact, I absolutely love mysteries myself. I love them. I read and watch a lot of mysteries. And I find those compelling too. They really delve into human nature. I actually, when I write my sci-fi, I try to mix in some of that psychology and character development and my characters to build them up. One area that I was getting feedback on my earlier novels was that they really like my characters. They seem likable, they seem relatable, but they would like to see, readers want to see them develop more. I actually turned to mystery to learn how to do this, to delve into it. And it's funny, I actually have a bachelor's degree in experimental psychology, and I use that a lot in developing not just characters, but their situations and how they're going to interact with them. I work really hard to try to make my characters like real people that you can relate to in these larger than life settings. And, let's take us off of Earth. Let's take us out of everything that we know. Then what? How do we act? What happens? What do we do with this greater power and greater knowledge? What do we do with it? How do we use that wisdom? How do we build and grow? How do we use it? What do we do with it, good or bad? It's just amazing how you can mix all of these things in. And between my degree and mysteries, actually, it helped me kind of nail down these characters and these interpersonal relationships that you have to really fill out a story. My stories are, like every other writer, based on what's going on in the world right now, what's going on in my life right now. Obviously, Singularity, written in the wake of the COVID pandemic. I imagine the next pandemic down the line, about 100 or so years, and what will we do with greater technology to rebuild? What if that technology was the problem? Broken time. Talked about a lot of theoretical physics with multiverse theory, and that was in the wake of that, and the Sentient series were both in the wake of my father's passing. And my husband had a subdural hematoma 13 months after my father passed away. So I was dealing with I did lose one of the main men in my life, and I almost lost the other one. It was shocking. I dealt with a lot of emotional aftermath, and writing really helped me to process my grief, healing, and growth through that. And having that extra space out there, it was like doing it futuristic was a safe space. I could take it out of right now and put it someplace else where I could put these characters in there. I could look at it and deal with it and figure out what to do with all of these confusing and disturbing emotions that I just didn't know how to process. The Earthside trilogy and box set wrote about 11 years ago. That was in the wake of my father-in-law passing from dementia. And I've lost a lot of older relatives to dementia. That was my last go through with it. And the Earthside trilogy and the companion novels really dealt with kind of meaning of life and what does it mean to be human. What if we're the aliens? What if the aliens are us? What if we brought that down? All these big scary monsters that you see in sci-fi movies. What if we brought it down to a more personal level and realized it could be us? Really, it's really fertile ground, not only to develop stories, but I hope as writing these stories helps me just create and deal with and process life and imagine the what ifs in such a large futuristic context. I want to take my readers with me, and I want you to do the same thing that I do when I'm writing these books. I want you to read these books and not only be entertained but inspired. Put yourself in there and imagine, if you lived in such a world. How would you do it? What would you do? How would it impact your life, your growth, how you go about day-to-day living? Would you really, you want to get out of, if you're frustrated, you really want to get out of your circumstances, would you literally get on a ship and leave Earth and just leave it all behind? That's something that I explore in Splinter, my first sci-fi novel that I wrote during National Novel Writing Month back in 2010. What would you do for financial security? Well, at least financial security was the guise for this main character actually just being confused about life and not knowing what to do or how to process things. That was a whole job change situation that I had just gone through and adapting to change. I'll talk more about how these novels came to be and how they developed based on life and personal circumstances while I was writing them as we go through each book. But for now, I would like to kind of keep it in context with my latest release, Singularity, and how, that whole experience just shaped me. None of us had ever been through anything like that before, and I think it forced all of us to come out of ourselves and just think broader. Think bigger. Everything that we knew, we were locked down. Everything that we knew, we relied on technology to stay connected. And what has that meant going forward? How has it helped us rebuild and grow and reconnect and kind of get back out there and develop the world after? That's a big question. And the ethics, of course, more fertile ground to explore. That's really great for character development, is the ethics. How far would you go to be right? And I have come to realize, actually recently, as I'm working on my work in progress, the Dark Mirror trilogy, that's also kind of a theme in my writing, is how far would you go to be right? And what would the consequences of that be? Big questions, big stories, big questions, big stakes. There's a lot you can do with all of that space. So I want to end this video with issuing you an invitation. If you find this interesting, I welcome you to sign up for my newsletter. Do you like freebies? I offer freebies in many of my newsletters. Go to my website. I'll drop the link below. Go there, sign up for my newsletter, check the website, look at the blog, see if any of those books kind of catch your interest, and feel free to expand your imagination and rewrite your narrative. That's all. Have a great day.